Green River Distilling Company is proud to sponsor this video tribute honoring the Medley Brothers as 2025 Owensboro Business Hall of Fame laureates. In the year 1634, John Medley was one of the earliest English Catholics who came to the New World to escape religious persecution in England. John Medley brought a still with him and settled in Maryland on the Potomac River. John's son, John Jr., farmed about 500 acres in the area now known as Medley's Neck. John Jr. made whiskey for his personal use with his father's still. The Medleys remained in Maryland for another 3 generations. After the Revolutionary War in 1786, the Medleys made their way to Kentucky. This was the first generation of Medleys to distill Kentucky bourbon whiskey. The 6th generation John Medley moved to Washington County, Kentucky, where he found a rich land and a demand for this new type of whiskey. It was a true American whiskey that was made from corn and aged in charred white oak barrels. John knew his future as a distiller was in this new state of Kentucky. Upon John Medley's death, his son Thomas operated the distillery. In 1832, Thomas Medley's youngest son William joined the distillery in Washington County, Kentucky. They were also involved with other distilleries in the region. When R.N. Wathen opened his distillery in 1870, his grandson George Medley went to work for him. George and his wife, Anna Isabella Sims Medley, knew of a distillery in Owensboro, Davis County that was closing. After the Medleys visited this location, George purchased the Davis County Distilling Company in 1901. He appointed his son Thomas as secretary-treasurer, and after moving his family to Owensboro, George's 3 other sons soon joined the company. George Medley died on Christmas Eve 1910, and his sons acquired the distillery and Thomas became president. A year later, a fire destroyed a warehouse and a bottling house at the distillery. More than 40,000 barrels of whiskey were lost in the fire in just 3 hours. Despite this loss, the Davis County Distilling Company was valued between $150,000 and $200,000, which is about $5 million today. In the early 1920s, the Kentucky distillery sent 20,000 barrels of bourbon a week down the Ohio River on barges, where they would offload them in New Orleans. Then the barrels were put on sailboats and moved to the East Coast. They would return via the Natchez Trail to Nashville and on to Kentucky with the proceeds of their sales. During Prohibition from 1920 to 1932, Davis County Distilling Company closed. However, Thomas Medley was granted permission to bottle small amounts of bourbon for medicinal purposes, which were distributed to drugstores. After Prohibition in 1933, Thomas reopened the distillery. He employed his 5 sons in the business: Wathen, Tommy, John, Ben, and Eddie. In 1940, Thomas sold the business to Fleischmann Distilling Company and retired. Thomas and his wife, Florence Ellen Wathen Medley, raised 15 children, 8 boys and 7 girls. They resided at 1600 Parish Avenue, where Owensboro Catholic High School is located today. Being raised in a large family instilled the importance of teamwork in the Medley brothers. Wathen, Tommy, John, and Ben were college graduates, while Eddie left college to serve in the Army during World War II. All the brothers were former athletes. Their teamwork would help them when, in 1940, the 5 sons of Thomas Medley, known as the Medley Brothers, purchased the defunct Kentucky Sour Mash Distilling Company property and established the Medley Distilling Company. This was the site of the old Green River Distillery, which burned to the ground in 1918. Wathen would serve as president, Tommy as vice president, master distiller, John as secretary-treasurer, Ben as vice president, and Eddie as warehouse manager. Their early business model of hiring within local families for several generations ensured accountability, a quality bourbon, and the pride that would come from working as family units throughout the years. During the 1950s, Owensboro had 3 booming bourbon distilleries, which included the Medley Distilling Company, Fleischmann Distilling Company, and Glenmore Distilling Company. Local county schools were finding it difficult to finance their operations, so together, the 3 distilleries paid their taxes early, which allowed the county schools to remain operational. During their ownership of Medley Distilling Company, they maintained between 150 and 200 employees. The grain was sourced locally from Owensboro Grain Company. Livestock farmers benefited by supplementing their feed with slop and distillers' dry grain, which are byproducts of the distilling process. While the Medley brothers remained with the traditional method of production, they supplemented it with scientific controls and instruments not available to their father or grandfathers. They were the first to combine tradition with innovation during the 1940s and 1950s in many well-known brands, including Medley Brothers and Five Brothers. In the early 1950s, Medley's Bourbon USA was distributed by the German Herzberg family. It became the #1 selling bourbon in Europe. In 1957, the Medley brothers were producing old-time sour mash bourbon exactly the same way they were taught by their father. 4 generations of experience used a method known as Medley's Heart of the Run, which used only the middle of each day's run. The middle run is described in the U.S. Treasury document dated June 1, 1912, as the best spirit produced. In 1959, the Medley brothers sold the Medley Distilling Company to Renfield Importers of New York. Wathen and John continued as president and secretary-treasurer until their retirements. Ben and Tommy built a new distillery, Old Stanley Distillery, in Stanley, Kentucky. Eddie passed away in 1953. The Medley Distilling Company flourished in the 1960s, but they were not without challenge. In the early morning hours of Friday, July 1, 1960, lightning struck Warehouse D at Medley Distilling Company. More than 1 million gallons of bonded whiskey were destroyed along with the warehouse. The property damage was estimated to be $2,500,000. In one warehouse fire, the federal government suffered a loss of $8 million to $8,500,000 in potential withdrawal tax, which is one of the approximately 23 taxes paid by the distillery. Despite this tragedy, the resilience of the Medleys prevailed. The distillery then changed hands several times, but in 1995, Charles Medley purchased the distillery, returning it to the Medley family. He named it the Charles Medley Distilling Company. The Medley family heritage remains today as Charles and his son Sam continue to keep the family brands alive. They own a portfolio of Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey brands, such as Wathen Single Barrel Bourbon and Medley Brothers Bourbon. In 2019, Charles was inducted into the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. The Medley family has been involved in the distilling industry for centuries. They kept the old world traditions alive with new technology that would make the new bourbon whiskey coming out of Kentucky an internationally sought-after spirit. The spirit of the Medley family legacy is one built on passion, tradition, as well as innovation. From their family throughout the centuries, the good that was poured has been immeasurable, making bourbon Medley style. The Medley Brothers, the best in business, inspiring the next in business.